What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Outriders build guide, and today let's take a look at the really awesome infinite rocket spam Technomancer build. Yes, it's finally possible to run an anomaly build for this class thanks to some recent changes to the Grim Inventor set, and this build right here literally has it all. It has huge AoE explosions, very high damage, it's obviously viable for any high-end content, and most important, it has extremely high survivability. So if you want a bit of distraction from the usual bullet builds, this is gonna be for you, and let's jump right into it. Now, as I was saying, we're gonna make use of the Grim Inventor set, specifically the headgear, the chest piece, and finally the legs, which will give you the perfect setup. And the reason we're using this is because of a massive buff to its set bonus with the recent update. So while Tools of Destruction is active, a confirmed hit with a pain launcher refills 20% of your ammunition for both the minigun and the RPG. In its previous iterations, this refill would only work once, but they removed that cap and now you can constantly refill that with the pain launcher, which is perfect because this build will work really nice with the pain launcher. And there's another advantage to the build, which is the fact that you can make use of a ton of tier 1 mods, meaning that you don't need a huge investment to make this build viable. So let's go over the build setup right here, starting of course with the skills. The 3 skills that we're going to be using is the pain launcher, the tools of destruction obviously, and finally the fixing wave, just in case something goes horribly wrong. Now, as far as the weapons go, it doesn't really matter what you're using because you're never going to switch to these as long as everything goes fine, but maybe get a weapon that might have some skill life leech on it so that you can get more heals when you're dealing damage to enemies. Anything else doesn't really matter, just choose whatever you want to. Now, as far as the skill tree goes, we're gonna make use of the bottom anomaly build, and the reason is because, yeah, Tools of Destruction scales up with anomaly power and you will want to stack as much of that as possible and also as much cooldown reduction as possible. This is the reason why I went with the 2 ordnance technician nodes right here at the bottom that reduces the ordnance cooldown by 30%. So this includes the pain launcher as well. And yes, you're going to want to have that on a very low cooldown to constantly replenish your rockets and continuously shoot them without having to worry too much about the ammo. This is the same reason why we also went with the 2 Gadgeteer nodes right here in the middle tree, because it reduces the cooldown on the fixing wave by another 30%, and fixing wave is another way for us to replenish our HP and also our rockets with the Quartermaster mod that I will showcase in just a little bit. Everything from this point on is just about more damage and survivability, so I got the heavy absorption for additional skill leech and also the armored unit for more armor, since we're not gonna use too much of this on the gear itself. And finally the tech bond, which will give you a huge 50% anomaly power increase when activating ordnance. So this is another reason why you will want that pain launcher on as low cooldown as possible so that you can constantly be under this buff right here and subsequently buff up your rocket damage. But with that out of the way, let's take a look at the actual mod distribution. And as I've said, you're gonna make use of a ton of tier 1 mods, meaning that it's super easy to create this setup. But I do have a big tip for you right here, and that is to go back in the starting town and take a look at this vendor NPC right here, because he will sell a ton of green items and you can just check out the items, see what tier 1 mod it has on them, and if it has the proper one, you can go ahead and buy it so that you can more easily set up the other tier 3 mods, for example. Now, as I was saying, you're gonna want a ton of rockets, 11 or 12 depending on your preference. So for that, we're gonna be using the bang for your buck, which is going to grant you a 100% base ammo increase to your selected tool. So this includes the RPG and also the Rocket Man. You can shoot 3 additional rockets, and this together should already bring you your rocket count to about 11. You also need damage and radius for these rockets, which is why we're using Demolition Man to increase its damage by over 200k, and also Special Delivery to increase its radius by 35%, meaning that they will have a huge AoE and they will constantly deal over 500,000 damage every time you shoot them, including to small and big bosses. It doesn't really matter, and there's also the added advantage that it acts as an interrupt. These rockets will actively interrupt enemies, so between the damage and the AoE and the interrupts, this is going to make the build absolutely crazy. From this point on, it's just about buffing up the pain launcher and making it as effective as possible, which is why we're using the Reign of Pain tier 1 mod to further decrease its cooldown by another 34%. And between these, the cooldown reduction on your gear, and of course those nodes I was talking about in the anomaly skill tree, you're going to have about 8.5 to 9 seconds cooldown on it, which would be almost perfect. This finally brings us to the Quartermaster mod, the foolproof part of the build. This tier 3 mod will make your fixing wave to not just replenish your HP but also your weapon magazine, including those rockets, so in case your pain launcher fails, in case you need a quick heal or a quick replenish, this is another step for you right there to not fail miserably and get destroyed by the enemies. The last few mods is all dependent on your preference. Of course, a Captain Hunter mod is what I fully recommend for that additional 25% damage to elites and bosses. You can also go with a tier 1 freeze barrage to make the pain launcher rocket to also inflict freeze to have a little bit more CC and keep everybody in place so that you can deal additional damage. You can also add something like a damage absorber instead in case you find yourself not surviving too much, but personally I don't think it's that needed. I think that you can totally make do with the armor you already have from the anomaly build, and of course the massive skill life leash that will pretty much let you face tank most of the enemies in the game. As a matter of fact, I did not have any trouble face tanking literally every single enemy in the game. And the only other mod that I think you're gonna have pre-installed is the Cannonade. The pain launcher has its number of rockets increased by 10, meaning that it's still useful because those rockets, when they land, they give you another chance to replenish your ammo by 20%. So the more rockets you shoot, the more you replenish, the more you're gonna be able to spam your primary rocket with the RPG from the tools of destruction. And this build literally changes things a little bit for the Technomancer because this class has been kinda stuck for about 6 months at this point with the same build, with the same like bullet BR build, which honestly kinda grew a little bit boring for me at the very least. Now obviously it's not going to perform as well as the pure bullet damage build that you already can with the Borealis set, but it comes pretty close. Your rockets will constantly deal over 500,000 damage, up to 600-700k if you have the build maxed out, and I don't think you're going to run into too much trouble. As a matter of fact, there's one advantage compared to that set, which is your way higher survivability. So go ahead, test this out, let me know how it works for you, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.